Welcome to another installment of the Captain's Table. I'm your guest host today. My name is Mike Gatto. And today I have a true legend with us, somebody who has certainly left his mark on California politics over many, many years, and that is Chuck Calderon. Chuck, welcome.
Pleasure to be here, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And I should tell you something that, hopefully is very flattering. And that is, I was asked to do guest interviews for this new podcast, and they like the idea of one former lawmaker interviewing another. And my first interview was with Willie Brown, and the interview went really well. And afterwards, I kind of informally polled staff and Sacramento types who they wanted me to interview next. And the consensus was that it was you. So hopefully that's flattering.
That's what you'll say to your next interviewee, right?
Well, look, I will ask folks who they want next, but I'm very happy to have you here, and a lot of people wanted to hear it. And I always tell people at the beginning of these that keep in mind these interviews are not just for listeners' entertainment, but they're for the history books. There's a lot of people listening who value the advice that comes through the interviews. We only have one rule here, and that is be authentic, be yourself. We love it when people tell us stuff that we haven't heard before. So let's get right into it.
Okay.
Why don't we start by you telling the listeners who don't know you a little bit about your story. Where were you born? How did you first get into politics? When were you first elected? And then when were you elected next?
Okay. Well, I was born in East Los Angeles. I grew up from about fifth grade. I'd say it was about fourth grade and fifth grade. There were gangs. They chased me home. One time they chased me up a roof, and I had to wait there till 10 o'clock at night for them to go away. And then my parents wanted to know where I was. But I like to think that's where I honed my political skills. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. My mother was literally a coal miner's daughter. Her father died of black lung disease working in the coal mines of Arizona. In high school, I was a student body officer, first team varsity basketball. But my school counselor told me that I would never get into college and tried to track me into the trades, which is fine, but it wasn't what I wanted. So I literally started college at East Los Angeles and ended up being accepted to State College by complete accident. I can go back and talk about that if you want. My dream was to go to law school and to be the youngest member elected to the assembly. I mean, that literally was my dream.
Wow.
Because I had met and worked in the campaign of assembly member by the name of Walter Karabian, and he was young when he was elected, and I wanted to beat his record.
And how old was Karabian when he was first elected? Do you remember?
Yeah, he was. I think he was 28.
Wow.
And I ended up getting elected at 32, so I missed it.
Not far behind. But
I mean, that's what I wanted to do. I want to go to law school. I was going to go into the legislature, and then when I got out, I was going to work maybe in municipal law, and I actually ended up doing that. Going with two law firms, or one law firm, two law firms that actually did that work, but I ended up doing more than just municipal. I graduated from, as I said, I got admitted clearly by accident to Cal State LA, and then I got accepted to UC Davis. I got out, became a former prosecutor and a partner in the firm of Nossaman LLP. I was elected to the school board in Montebello, where I attended school in 1978, and then elected to the state assembly in 1982. I served in the legislature for 24 years. I became the first Latino Senate Majority Leader and the only legislator to serve as Majority Leader in both houses.
Wow.
And then here we are.
Now, you had a gap, of course, between your your tenure, you got in before term limits. You served a long time, and then I actually admit I don't know the story of how you left the first time, or if you even left, but I believe you were not under necessarily the term limits, or you had the capability to serve another 3 terms in the assembly. Now, why was that?
Well, because I left and I served 8 years, and then another 8 years in the Senate, 8 years in the Assembly, another 8 years in the Senate. And I was termed out of the Senate in 1990. But that was the year that term limits passed on the ballot.
Wow.
So I left the Senate. I went to work for a law firm for, I don't know, 8 years or so. And then my old seat in the Assembly opened up, and I decided to run again and got elected in, I think it was 2012, and served.
Oh, it was before that, because when I got there,
2006.
Yeah, 2006.
2006, and served to 2012.
Yep. And it must have been fascinating because, your second time around, you were there with green idiots like me. You were there with people who had, 1/10 the political experience as you, and very little real experience in the State House. And that had to have been kind of interesting.
Well, I'm trying. Yeah, I think, I was majority leader when you and I were teammates, right?
Yes, we were.
And so what was it like? Let's start with Mike Gatto.
Uh-oh. I'm deeply concerned.
I don't quite remember what the issue was, but it was a leadership position, and I needed to whip votes on the floor. And I remember you looking very nervous as I walked around to talk to other people, knowing I was going to come back to you. So I finally did. I sat down and I said, and you stopped me before I could say anything else. You said, "Chuck, let me tell you something. I mean, I would do anything, but I can't vote for this bill. I'm going to tell you why. My district is this, my district is that. This guy is going to challenge me." I mean, you had it all worked out, and I just can't. I just can't. Please don't ask me to vote for this bill. And I paused, and then I said, "You feel better?"
I remember that well.
And you said, "Yeah." You said, "Yeah, I have to vote for this bill." I said, "Right."
I think your words were a little harsher, though. I don't think you said, "Do you feel better?" I think you said, "Are you done?" But I mean, for those people listening, I mean, this gets to there is a little human lesson here, and I can, even though I was the one taught it, right? I have the ability to recognize it, and that is, sometimes people just need a vent. Politics is a very human business, and I probably that day I just needed to vent, but it was an important vote for leadership, and I ended up voting for that bill. So
well, but I also and you're not the only one to go through that. I went through that, later. In terms of that learning experience, and then I think we can talk about my electorate experience.
Well, yeah. So I wanted to ask you that because right after I was elected, you relayed to me some really good advice, and I believe this advice should be emblazoned in steel at the top of every door of every city council, every legislative body, every homeowners association. And really should be taught to everybody when they join a new organization that they don't know much about. And if I remember correctly, this advice came to you from Richard Alatorre. Now, keep in mind, this is not going to be on the radio. This is a podcast. You can tell the story in its original language in all its glory. And I'm happy you're going to tell it because I'm sure that I don't do justice to it. So please, to our listeners, relay the story of Richard Alatorre's advice to you.
Well, like you, back when I was reelected, I was the first group of elected assembly members that when Willie was speaker, he just went speaker, and he decided he was going to elect the best, highest quality members to the state assembly. And I was running my district. I knew Richard Calderon. In college, I'd worked on his campaign, helping with his precinct program. And so I went to him, and he became kind of the mentor and the connection to Willie, and ultimately got Willie's support. And so on literally the day we were sworn in, I walked into his office and I said, look, tell me, what can you tell me that will help me be successful, good legislator?
Right.
And he said, just shut the fuck up. And so I thought, well, okay. I get that. And I said, what else? He said, just shut the fuck up. And I said, okay. All right. I got it. So I went almost 2 years where I didn't say a word on the floor, and listened when I was with members, and they told their stories. But I was quiet until one day on the floor there was a bill that was killed, and I moved for reconsideration, and I decided I was going to persuade the House that they made a mistake. So I did. I prepared just like a good lawyer. I spoke passionately on the floor. I thought eloquently.
And I want to say you had some subject matter expertise on this bill, right? I mean, you could certainly talk with intelligence, and you probably gave a 5-minute speech with bullet points, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was, arguing before the Supreme Court.
Right.
I was prepared. And when I sat down, Richard was sitting next to me. He was sitting. He wasn't my seatmate, but he came over from his seat and sat next to me.
Probably with an amused look on his face. I can picture it now.
And he looked over and he nodded towards me and, sort of gave me an upside down smile, but it was positive. And he says, good work. He said, good job.
Now, what was the original vote on the bill before reconsideration, if you remember? It was probably, 39-42 or 39-41, something like that.
Overwhelmingly. I mean, it had an overwhelming majority. And I thought there needed to be no debate. We needed to be thinking more about the kind of bills we're voting on. I mean, I was doing, my freshman thing, if you will, and trying to be a good legislator and doing what I thought was best. And when I finished, I sat down and then Richard's sitting next to me. He says, pretty good. He said, I think you did a good vote. You think you persuaded some people? And I said, Willie, Richard, I think I did. I really do. So nobody else spoke on the bill, and they asked me to close. I closed on the bill. They took the vote up, and it got more no votes than it did last time. And I looked over at Richard, and he said, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing that's amazing, I mean, besides the overall message here, which, has value, like I said, in HOAs and city councils, which is, if you're coming into an organization that there's, 100 years, 200 years of history, it's an inside baseball type thing. The first couple years, the first 3 years, I think, observe, listen, try to learn how the thing is run. Tremendous value in that. But the second reason why I think the story is so valuable is it really talks about the legislature, right? Because the public, when they watch television, they think that it's all florid speeches and, tremendous eloquence on the floor, and that's going to change people's minds. But the reality is many of the votes we take, right? People have made up their minds on vastly other reasons than, passionate speeches. And that's why I love that story. I think it is, just fascinating. There's tremendous advice as you learned, and as many of us learned in Richard Alatorre's simple aphorism. And then there's also, there's a lot of advice there on how politics really works.
Well, yeah, I mean, and most votes are already predetermined by the time you get to the floor, and in terms of where members are going to vote. But it's important to be quiet and to listen. and to learn. You need to learn. You need to learn the culture, and you need to learn the politics. You need to learn the rules.
I will also say that there's one member of the assembly right now who's very young, and man, his first term was just a colossal mess of errors. I mean, he pissed off his colleagues. He promised things to the people that he couldn't do, that were unconstitutional, all sorts of things. And I just remember watching his first term unfold and just thinking, man, this guy could really use some advice from Richard Alatorre or from Chuck Calderon. but I mean, he just put his foot. It was really funny. And I certainly look. I mean, the couple times I spoke up in my first term before I knew where the bathrooms were, I probably we all make mistakes. So we'll be right back after this short commercial break. But all right. Well, I want to talk about something that was very much that you did very, very well, and you were the first in your family to get elected. I did not know that you came from a coal mining family. That means a lot to me because I did too. My grandfather was a coal miner in Colorado and died of lung cancer. Just so very, very similar story to your family. But you were followed in politics by your brothers, your son, and your wife. And,
right.
That says a lot. I mean, clearly the voters of your district, you were doing something right. They liked what you did. They liked your name. And look, many of our listeners know I'm first and foremost a proud father. My kids mean the world to me. I'm raising them right now. That's one of the reasons why I've pressed pause in politics. And I want to tell a short story and then I'll get to the question. So before your son Ian got elected, you introduced us at the Democratic Convention and you were taking him around, introducing a lot of people. And I look across the room, I see this kid. He's good looking. I mean, he's so pretty that I don't know. People who know him know this, right? And he's charming. His dad is the majority leader of the state assembly. And I had one lobbyist, say to me, what I think everyone was thinking, which is, gosh, I really want to hate this guy. I mean, this lobbyist was like, I really want to hate Ian, right? But it turns out Ian is a really good person. You can't hate him. Like he's kind, he's funny, he's humble. And my question from one father to another is, how the heck did you do this? What did you do in his upbringing to make him the person he is today? He's grown up, you're in the legislature, he's meeting interesting people, he's got a fairly privileged upbringing. What did you do to make him humble and kind and all the things that he is today?
That's a hard question to answer because I am who I am with my kids and my family, which is completely different than who I am certainly my career and to a large degree in the outside world. And so it's hard for me to think, well, what did I do? I can summarize some things. I asked my son. I have a 19-year-old son who just finished his first year at Cal, and I hit him cold with it, and which was probably not fair. I mean, dad asking you, what did I do right?
Yeah, that would be a weird question, right?
That was a total weird question. But he said, you helped me find my voice and allowed me to be me.
That's interesting.
And I think, and I started thinking back on what exactly I did with Ian and I did with my son, Brennan. And what I did is I was different, as I said, when I was home. I wasn't the way the world was. I was always the way I wanted the world to be. And so
wow.
I always showed him love. It wasn't unconditional. I mean, it was unconditional, but there were rules to it because, I felt I had to teach him as he's growing up, right, wrong, and, how to face life. But I had a lot of values, and the values were the ones that you want and wish the world would live by. And I would always impart those values to him. He never, there wasn't anything he wouldn't come and talk to me about. I mean, nothing. And I made him feel open, I made it feel like he was open to be able to talk to me. And it didn't matter if he ever failed, because he knows he would never fail in my eyes. I always told him, you know, he said, I want to be like you. And I said, that's great. And then what you can do when you achieve that, you can be better than me. And that always be compassionate, be respectful, help people when you can. And when you fail, just ask yourself, did I do my best? Was this my best effort? And if it's not, then analyze it and apply that in the future. But if you did do your best, I mean, honestly and truthfully, between a conversation of you and yourself, did you do your best? And if you can say yes, then that's good enough, son. That's good enough. So I know, I guess those, that all kind of wore off, but it was amazing because not only when people met Ian, did they say, my God, you know, he's a good looking kid. Obviously he's not yours. I had a lot of members come back, especially when he started his first term, come back and say, you know, Chuck, I have a completely different image of you, he said, and because your son is such an amazing person. Yep. And I said, it makes me even see you in a different light. And it wasn't easy for Ian. When he ran, everybody, you know, they ran a whisper campaign on him. He's just a spoiled brat. He's being financed by his father, and you know, he's too young for the job. He has no sense, no wisdom, no experience. And they even, one time, that the Democratic convention was passing around a flyer saying he was anti-Semitic.
I remember that. I was there, and the crazy thing is that, you know, after all that, you know, the world learned that he was just the opposite. He was not spoiled. He was extremely intelligent. He you know, was extremely compassionate, and I don't know. Look, you raised a great kid, and so this will not be the last time that I come to you for advice, because you know it.
Well, I do want to say that when he started, he said, Dad, there's a lot of people out there that I think that don't like me. I mean, I can feel it. You know, what am I going to do? Things they said about me in the campaign. I said, son, all you have to do, I'm tell you what to do. Be yourself. Just be yourself, and they'll come to you. And because I knew what a good soul he was, and I think it worked.
Oh, that's great. Well, I want to go back to your first time in office for a little bit, because you know, I knew you, of course, as the loyal majority leader to Speaker Perez, and a good one. We already told the story of you whipping votes, but it wasn't always like that. I mean, in your first time in the assembly, you were. First of all, life was different. The numbers were different, and there was more of a center than there is now. The assembly was not split as significantly Democrat versus Republican as it is now. And of course, you know, you became part of what was known as a sort of rebellious faction. Of course, I'm talking about the Gang of Five, and I'd like you to, you know, tell. I mean, the Gang of Five was in the newspapers a lot during that time. You know, a lot of people up and down the state of California followed closely the happenings in the Capitol, which is something that doesn't always happen these days. So maybe tell some of our younger listeners about the Gang of Five, who it was, what happened, and what you learned from it.
Well, let me start by telling you a story. It was between my mother and I. When we were in this full-on conflict with Willie, and we were getting a lot of column inches. We got more than he did, actually, because we corrected him, wanted to know how we were doing. But it was always at the same time, the LA Times was doing expose on gang violence in Los Angeles. And so my mother, she actually, when I first was elected, she walked 100 precincts with me. She was 65, and
Wow.
she walked 100 precincts with me. And one time I was, during the Gang of Five, I was back with giving a speech at the Chamber of Commerce, and I see her walk in the back of the room. Now, my mother doesn't do this. She doesn't just show up unannounced. She'll always call and ask if it's okay, or she'll always mention, I'd like to come and see you. But she would always ask permission before she showed up. She never showed up, in effect, unannounced. So as soon as I saw her, she took a seat in the back. As soon as I saw her, I started to become very uncomfortable. I can think of, who's in the hospital, who died. I mean, what's going on? So I ended my speech, and I went back to her, and I said, Mom, what's going on? What's the matter? She says, well, no, nothing. I says, everybody okay? She goes, no, everyone's okay. She says, but I'm really mad at you. I said, why? She goes, I walked 100 precincts with you. I said, yeah, I worked hard on your campaign. I even put up signs, and you talked on the phone. I said, yeah. I said, yeah, Mom, what's your point? She says, I worked hard to put my son, a Mexican-American, in the legislature, and the first thing you do is you go out and join a gang.
Oh, wow. Okay, so she did not like the terminology then.
No, but
that's really funny.
But then she smiled, and she understood exactly. I don't know if she totally understood it, but she totally was in my court. And she says, son, I taught you to do what's right. Do what's right. And I'm with you 100%. And she gave me a big hug and a kiss.
That's really nice.
But the Gang of Five was an interesting development. It was, I guess, it's hard to, if you see, depending on who you talk to, you get a different story. I felt that it went back to when Willie said, I'm going to elect the best group of legislators, the most talented group of legislators, as my first job as the leader. And he did. He brought in an amazing class. And in fact, I even heard stories afterwards that he, as we were elected and we were starting to come in, and I was talking about, he's thinking, whoa, they're smart enough. What if they organize against me? So then he was thinking, maybe it wasn't such a good idea to elect such quality people. Well, that didn't happen. But 4 years or so later, Willie runs a one-man show, period.
Yeah.
And he doesn't share authority. He'll help you. He'll help you get what you wanted. But he had one goal, and that was to be the longest sitting speaker, which, he accomplished. And, but it was because of that, what he would do is me and the other four legislators, he never put us in positions of power, except for maybe Jerry Condit was the only one. He put him in chair of GO, government organizations.
Wow.
But that's gaming and horse racing and a lot of that.
Yeah, I jokingly call government organization is Sacramento insiders know that it's a very powerful committee. It has such an innocuous name. I guarantee very few listeners know what it does. I jokingly call it the ATF committee, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Committee, although it doesn't really do much with firearms, but it really is the vice committee, right? It regulates anything that's perceived to be a vice.
Well, but he would invite us to all his parties, we go to parties with Nancy Sinatra and George Hamilton, and we'd go very exclusive dinners by Wolfgang Puck. And, I remember one fundraiser he had and sat us at the head table with Sammy Davis Jr. at the time. It scares me that there may be some people listening who don't know who those people are. But in any event,
well, so it sounds like what he was doing is and leaders do this, to this day, but he was trying to placate you, trying to keep you happy, try to seduce you and keep you loyal, but not really sharing power, not really giving you what you really wanted, which was to, have your own role in shaping the policies of the state.
Exactly. And so one time, when the next round of committee appointments were handed out after we had been meeting for some time, actually down in Cabo San Lucas. And we spent a couple summers down there, a couple breaks down there. And so we had decided that we would try and get placed on all the key committees. And one of the key committees I was placed on was finance and insurance. And the issue of no-fault insurance came up. And the trial lawyers were absolutely against no-fault insurance, and they were a major player, part of Willie's base. And but it clearly appeared is that if we could go to no-fault insurance for injuries up to like $20,000, that would make and then have the regular system, negligence system, kick in after that. That would lower insurance rates, especially auto rates that were very high, significantly. So we got together and we put out a no-fault insurance bill out of F&I over the objection of the chair and over Willie's objection.
Wow.
And that started it. I remember he called us in one by one, and when he called me in, he pulled out a chart, and he said, "My gosh," he says, "how many you have? What, 13 staff, 12 staff? You have a nice office, got a lot of supply. I mean," he says, "I've been pretty good to you." And I said, "You have been." And he said, "What would you say if I just took everything away from you and left you with nothing?"
Wow.
I'd say, I told him that would be the biggest mistake that you could make. And he said, "Really? Why is that?" I said, "Because then I'd have nothing to lose." And right at that time, he got a call in. My wife was expecting, and she was in labor, or starting to go into labor, and I had to get home in time for the birth. And so he said, "Chuck, go. This can wait." And so we came back, and circumstances got more heated until finally we decided, Willie and us decided this had to end. And so because there's a lot of stuff we weren't doing that we needed to do. I mean, good policy, or for one thing. So we decided to have a vote, and it was agreed that I would be on the floor and challenge him.
Wow.
Because the Republicans, he pissed off Ross Johnson, and Ross Johnson was the one that helped him become Speaker in the first place. And by putting together a Republican Democratic coalition for speakership, and he had disrespected Ross Johnson, which, if you know him, that's something you don't do. You can't abide by that. And so Ross came to us and said he'd deliver votes. And he'd have to hold some of his members in line, but we might be able to get 41 votes. But we needed backup, and so I was chosen to be the head, or challenge Willie straight on, and because then I went to Latino legislators and asked them to be a vote for me, and that they would play a prominent role in my leadership. And as Latinos, they'd no longer be backbenchers, which I thought they were, at least treated that way. And they could be part of the team and help make decisions for the state. I never got any, and all of them were thinking about it, but especially Richard Polanco, and I said, but Richard ultimately, he ultimately didn't vote for me. So we took the vote, and it was over. And Willie won. He won because he actually pulled some Republicans to get up and nominate Ross Johnson.
Oh, wow.
They wouldn't vote for him, but they'd nominate Ross Johnson. And it was a very close situation because I think Lloyd Connolly was, in India or somebody working with Mother Teresa. and wasn't going to come home for the vote.
Wow.
And there was another legislator, Democrat, that wasn't going to come back. I can't remember who that was at the time. So it was very close, and I lost. And I went up to Willie on the floor, and I said, "Congratulations, Mr. Speaker." And and I shook his hand and walked away, because that's my ethic. That comes from years and years of playing organized ball. And
Sure.
And so he called me into the office afterwards. He says, "Why don't you come on? Why don't you come down?" I said, "I'm not going to go in your office, and you'll come out and just tell a bunch of lies about what you said in there and what I said." And he said, "No, Chuck says, come here. Let's just go. Come." So I went, and he said, "You know what? I always said you couldn't do it with 5." He says, "I did it with 3." He said, and you almost had me." He said, "You almost had me."
That's funny.
But he says, "I want to be, you're a warrior, and next time there's a fight, I want you on my side." And he said, what do you want?" And I wasn't going to ask for anything. I'm not going to be somebody who argued that there's a floor controlled by, a dictator, and who buys people off by handing out goodies. And so I wasn't going to go for that. I mean, that was sort of what my rap was on him when we were doing the whisper, or we were doing the campaign. And so I said, I don't want anything. He says, "Tell me what you want." I says, "I don't want a thing." He says, "Really? I mean, look, I really want you on my side, and you could have done this, and in time you could become speaker." I said, "Well, I'm not giving up." So he says, "Well, look at you. I'm going to do what I did, or what Leo McCarthy did when I lost to Leo McCarthy on a speakership vote." And he said, "I'm going to invite you in when there's an opening in the House, and you can be a strong person for leadership, and I'm going to offer you those positions, and I'm going to keep doing that until you find one that you want."
Huh.
And I says, "I don't want any of them." He says, "Nothing?" I says, "No." He says, "Just tell me what you want." I said, "Well, I want to be speaker." He says, You can't have that. That's my job."
Right.
And so anyway, finally I ended up saying, "Look, if you take care of the other guys, you won't have any trouble with me.
Huh.
I'll be settlement." And so he did. He met with all the others. He, essentially placed them where they wanted to be in the House in terms of leadership positions. And it ended there.
So he had stripped you of the 5 of you of your committees before that, and then he sort of restored them, right? Or gave you some.
Well, he did more than that. He would appoint me to boards and commissions and committee assignments, and then a couple of days later, he would remove me and put a press release out to my district showing how ineffective I was. He went in my district, offered $1 million to this one candidate who I beat when I first got elected. Offered him $1 million at the time to run against me.
Wow.
And his name was Arnold Glass, and he said, "No, I can't. I'm not going to do it." And Willie said, "Well, why?" He says, "Because Chuck can't be beat in this district." And so Willie stopped there and went over to try and get Jerry Eves and ran a campaign against Jerry Eves, where he was unsuccessful. But no, Willie and I, one day in the heat of the battle, we were walking around Eilish. Do you remember Eilish? Was Eilish?
No, it was not there when I was there.
Okay, well, it was an Irish bar, tiny place, but it was a hangout for everybody. And I walked in. And I was walking around, kind of seeing who's there. Willie walked in, and we met sort of face to face. And he says, "Chuck, you can't win." And I said, "Well, I may not win, but you're going to lose something in the process." And he says, "I'm going to do everything I can." In fact, when members come up with ideas on how much I can screw you guys, I promote them. And I'm going to work.
That's funny.
Hard, to do it. But and so we had this big exchange, and literally the whole place, which was like a room maybe 20 by 20, and there was 200 people in there, and it went quiet.
Wow.
You could hear a nail hit the floor, And so anyway, but that after all said and done, Willie and I became friends. I think we respected each other, and we're friends today. I'm up in Sacramento. I'll probably see him tomorrow at the new speaker's installation.
That's amazing. That's good to hear that all was well that ended well. This is the Captain's Table. We'll be right back after this short commercial break. So here's one that I ask a lot of guests, and I also tell folks to remember the mantra at the beginning of the show, which is, be authentic. This is part of the marketplace of ideas. And that is, what platform of the current Democratic Party could you live without? What do you think the Democratic Party is doing wrong? What is ill-advised right now that the Democratic Party is pushing for?
I'm amused by the question because it'd take probably a year's work or more to literally write an answer to that question. But if I can, let me just say it this way: it's like I'm going to talk about the Democratic Party. I remember one person defined the Democratic Party as a circular firing squad. And Democrats are a coalition of all different interests, and they're all very, very special interests and unique to the people that are committed to those causes. And one cause doesn't fight the other cause. Every cause agrees to every issue that the other cause wants, so that they will in turn support their cause. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, no, I totally understand.
So consequently, the Democratic Party makes all these alliances and promotes all of these issues, whether they truly support it or not. And it becomes so insular that many times they're out of step with Democrats outside of party activism, but they drive people like you and me when in the legislature to take positions on issues which are not necessarily in line with what voters want, and in that sense, it makes the party weak because there's a lot of unspoken conflict amongst each other.
Sure.
And then the Republican Party takes advantage of the issues adopted the Democratic Party that are out of step with the mainstream, if you will. And
Sure.
And the Republican Party becomes much more effective because they spend probably billions of dollars over years attacking those certain Democratic platforms that they think are out of touch with the majority in the state or in the country. And they, unlike Democrats, are more like a cult. They consider themselves a minority party, so they act like a minority in the sense that, I guess analogizing to Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, it's fighting everything, right? It's an insurgency in California versus, yeah.
And so they come together no matter what it is. It doesn't matter what the issue is. We decide this is the party line, and you better get in line or you're out.
Yeah.
So it's hard to it's hard to identify any one part of the platform because at any given time that part could be what becomes undoing for Democrats.
I understand.
And has become the undoing of Democrats.
I appreciate your answer. I think it's a good one. I think it's a valid one, but I still have to give you some grief for it being a political answer because you didn't necessarily give us one specific idea, but that's fine. That is fine. Because I do think what you're saying has significant merit. Well, we're getting towards.
I don't disagree
go ahead.
with party platforms, but I disagree what their priorities are because. It's not going to help us maintain the majority.
Yeah.
All right, go on.
Well, we're getting towards the end of our time together, and so I have another question that I like to ask just about everybody who I interview, and that is, you've met a lot of politicians over the years, thousands and thousands, probably from local water boards all the way up to many presidents. I'm curious, who is the most skilled politician that you've ever met? And then I always ask a follow-up, who is the most skilled politician that you've ever met that very few of the listeners will have heard of? So, who's the most skilled politician you ever met in general, and then who's the most skilled politician that folks might not know?
Well, let me start with the first part of the question because that's an easier one. I may not have an answer for the second part, but there isn't any one. To say there's just one master skilled politician that is the best in the world. Hell, even Machiavelli doesn't covet that title.
Sure.
Or deserve that title. But many politicians who I've interacted with that all had something, if you could put it together, I think you'd have a profile. One would start with Willie. Willie is shrewd. He's charming. He's a strategist, a master strategist, and he can do what he needs to do to get what he wants. Clinton, on the other hand, is somebody that when he spoke to you, he really made you feel like you're the only one in the room. Literally, doesn't matter who you were.
Sure.
I remember I was upset because there was a deaf girl that was waiting for a bus, sitting at a bus stop and signing her friend. And this gang car drove by, saw her signing, came back and shot her.
Jeez.
I was really upset, and happened at a time when we were the caucus was going to Sacramento and interact with the California delegation, and we had a meeting with the Secretary of Education, and I told him, I said, what happened, and I was fairly angry or passionate about it, and I said, what you need to do is quit separating all the money and giving a little bit to justice and a little bit to the local law enforcement. Get all your money and form a gang czar, and come out and take one issue at a time, focusing the energy and the money on that one issue as it relates to gangs. And so I realized that I should have shut the fuck up. But afterwards, he asked me to stay, and he says, "You're coming with me." I said, "Where are we going?" And we go in the elevator down the basement. We're traveling over. He says, "The president's giving a speech on gang violence. I want you to tell him what you just told me."
Wow.
So I sat there in front row. He went up and sat in a chair behind the president, and at the end, he motions me up there, and so I went up there, and he said, "Mr. President, this is Charles Calderon, legislator, represents this area. Explain the situation that I was passionate about." And so then turned it over to me. And I learned one fundamental rule. The first time you meet and speak to a president, you'll never say anything coherent for the first second.
That is so true.
But finally got my act together, and I explained to him what I had related to the education secretary. And the whole time, he was intensely focused on what I was saying and asking, responsive questions. And and I heard that he wasn't like that just with me. He's like that with everyone. And for retail politics, that's got to be one of the best I've ever seen.
And amazing that a guy could become president of the United States with, usually folks who are skilled at retail politics are not good at wholesale, right? They're not good at the broadcast. They're not good at, but he was both. I mean, he was immensely skilled with the retail, and he used that to become president, which is amazing, because usually they don't are not necessarily combined in the same person. And what about the second part? I mean, was there anybody, local politician or somebody who people might not have heard of, who you thought was sort of a wasted talent, or somebody who didn't necessarily become president or speaker, but who was just amazing at what they did?
There are people that, that I interacted with, maybe on one issue, or, but I can't think of anyone who was on that level.
Well, the sound you hear, listeners, is the Montebello City Council crying. But or one of the other cities in your district. I'm sure everybody wanted you to mention them, but no, that's a fair answer.
Everyone has their moments, and sometimes I'm there, and sometimes I'm not. But
I know.
That's a difficult question. I will add one more time. I was the first time Biden ran for president. I was on his steering committee for the state of California, and I thought he was incredibly passionate and sincere, and skilled in his ability to relate to people and to get things done. Yeah. So, at least on the known ones, those are ones that come to mind.
Well, thank you. This has been a great interview. I certainly learned a lot, and it was also very, very funny for me at times. I laughed a lot, and that's what life is all about, is learning and laughing. So thank you again. This was Chuck Calderon, somebody who is no stranger and is very, very well known in California politics. We thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. I had fun too.
Thanks. Chuck Calderon.